I looked up the definition of disciple. So one of the definitions is one of the original followers of Jesus. And if you're a Christian and you went to church, that's probably what you think.
That word is common. Common. Yeah.
That's actually the third part of the definition. The first one is one who embraces and assists in spreading the teachings of another.
Yeah.
The second one is an active adherent as of a movement or philosophy. So I think we're born into the world all as little disciples, and we're looking for a master.
Yeah.
With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoe's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more.
Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. Two guys exploring
the breeze.
Exploring the kingdom of God while shooting the breeze. I wouldn't have said it like that.
No, me either. I don't
know.
Because sometimes we do.
Yeah. We talk about stuff.
We do.
About the kingdom.
And things that matter. And
hopefully, try. By the way,
try to keep it.
I look mature. More mature? Do I look older?
Yeah. Yeah, man.
You want to tell everybody?
You look like you crossed a threshold recently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, into a new, as JFK would say, a new decade.
Decade.
Yes.
I am in my 60s now.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What in the world?
Yeah. There's two trains of thoughts on that, by the way.
Well,
I'm
going to stand in front of one of them.
Here
I'm
it is.
Sure.
Hopefully not get mowed down by it. Any year that ends in a zero, so like when you turn 40, that's actually the last year of your 30s.
Right.
Right. So
I could look at it
in
that
the last
way.
year of your 50s. You could say that your final year of your 50s.
Interestingly,
because you start with counting with 1. You don't start with 0, right? So
that's right. So I'm in my first weeks of
the last year of your 50s.
Right.
So when you turn 61, you're really in your 60s. That's how I like to buy you a little time.
Does.
You know?
In the in-between, the trains, the two trains of thought.
Sounds like shout out to Stackler Harmon, lawyer friends of ours. That sounds like something a lawyer would say.
Yeah.
You know?
Technically.
Anyway, so yeah, congratulations. You made it another year around the sun. Well done.
Yeah.
Yep.
60 is, I haven't even figured it out yet. And the fact that it's been a pretty big birthday, so it's been one of those, I have family members who really love birthday months.
Oh yeah.
Even 6-month birthdays. Mm-hmm. They know who they are.
Well, I'm gonna tell on them. Our brides have a birthday in the same month, and they expect to be celebrated for the month. All month. Yeah. Yeah.
So. But when you hit milestone birthdays, decade birthdays, you definitely have a few opportunities to be recognized and celebrated, which has been fun.
Yeah, I loved you guys did that for me when I entered the last year of my 40s and turned 50 years old. I'm going to say this because it's just funny as crap, but it's the one time a year I get more alcohol in a few days from all my friends. What beer? What it's just the funniest thing, man. So anyway, having to. I walked through your dining room yesterday. I was like, was there a party? Like what?
Yeah, it's the best. So
that's good.
Anyway,
good. Well, congratulations.
So
again.
Fun and. I've been asked a lot of questions. It's kind of like 60 reminds me of that time when you're a senior in high school. And so what are you going to do? What are you going to do after school?
Right.
I mean, that question is
threshold.
the question.
Right. You're on a threshold of a change of life in some way.
But 60s had a lot of that with friends and family. Like, what's next? What are you looking forward to? I think there's some kind of implication that there's a lot less to look forward to now. You're on the backside of your seventh inning.
You don't have a lot of gravy time,
right?
Where you can just
So I think that part of the
may that not be true. May you have gone through the 2/3 of your life. You got a third of it left. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Where it depends on where those trains are
and the mileage.
That's right. But in that question, I think, SJ, we're going to talk for, we're not sure how many episodes.
Yeah, we're just going to talk about this. Normally what we say is like, this is 2 episodes, this is 3, whatever. I voted and it's got 50% of the vote that we just talk about this till we're done talking about it.
Yeah. So the question, what are you going to do with the rest of your life, or what's next, or where are you going, what's left versus the high school, what's in front of you, where all the next decisions. But this conversation and conversations, and maybe even some other men that we'll bring in, really has a deep, meaningful focus of my heart's attention on men, the masculine journey, particularly what's wrong. What is wrong with men? What is wrong with us? And I don't even like to say it that way, even though that's such an attention getter. I mean, let's talk about what's wrong with men. But there's these other, Caleb and I were talking about it this morning, there's these other subtitles that are just really important to what's wrong with men, and like today, it's such a big conversation. It's multifaceted, tons of ingredients, lots of history, and I think it's I think we'll just kind of journey on this path of. Maybe a better way to say it is not what's wrong, but what's missing. What's missing?
Yeah. That's
Graham Cook.
Graham Cook. Yeah.
And when Graham was doing one of his prophetic offerings, and he's speaking prophetically as the Father might speak. The Father says, "I don't see what's wrong with you. I see what's missing."
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's just the subtlety of that is a significant change in the negativity that can come along with what's wrong with you.
Oh man, through gritted teeth.
Can I help you? Let me help you. I want to show you how I see you, says the Father. I want to show you what's missing, says the Spirit. I want to show you what the intention is and how I made you, what I made you for, says Jesus. And so all of that, I think, has somehow the spirit of this conversation. And, when I started putting together thoughts, there were a lot of thoughts of, what's happening or what's happened to get us in this space where, men, there's just a heaviness even in the conversation of men who reputationally we find ourselves without undeniable defense. Like some of the accusations that come against the masculine side of the table in gender. Yeah, we've earned a lot of it, and I'm not saying it's all men, but when enough men participate in something or don't seem to be able to shake confusion or naivety or being, in a lot of ways, ill-trained. Maybe that's a good way to. That's one of the top things I think of what's wrong with men. I think you said this from the stage a few times. Well, we kind of do what we've been trained to do, which really, that starts to be generationally significant. Well, who's doing the training? And I think those are all parts of, conversation. I think in this conversation, SJ, we're going to have several kind of Captain Obvious moments. Like, yeah, that's on the chart. That's part of the issues that face men. But what I hope is that we can regularly kind of go between, this has a cause, and this cause has an effect, and does it have a remedy? Is there any hope? Can we see generational masculinity redeemed, which is something that we on our team have been very, very, very intentional about exploring as men and for men. So the whole Dangerous for Good men summits that are, here we go, we put that out there and bang.
Yeah.
How many? 10? I mean, 10 between now and
January. On the calendar,
between now and
various
January.
Locations. DFGsummit.com. Go check it out.
I mean, even that encourages me that there are men who want to host an event for 200, 300, 500 men in all these places.
Yeah, I almost think, man,
that's phenomenal.
It is phenomenal. I almost think, we're getting a lot of response to it. If we did the What's Wrong with Men conference, I don't know, what kind of response we'd get with that. The other thing that occurs to me as you were sharing, we're calling this or our topic is What's Wrong with Men. I want to be really clear about something, and it's one of those things. There's sometimes where things seem subtle, that like there's a subtle difference between this and that. And then when you see it and you really understand it, it's not quite so subtle. So what I'm about to say is we're going to talk about what's wrong with men, not what men have been doing wrong. Because if you just talk about what men have been doing wrong, we're way too far downstream.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, that's
great. We're talking about the results in behavior of a problem that goes way back up to the headwaters.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, it's a great point.
So we may go into, we've got it on our notes because it's honoring is not the word. We want to honor the fact that our behavior has not been good in many respects, right? And so we want to honor those that were affected by that behavior.
Yeah.
And yet, at the same time, I heard this a long time ago. Unfortunately, I didn't hear it when my son was really young because it would have changed the trajectory of how I parented him. But until he was about 15 years old, I parented him to modify his behavior, not to build his character. And I think that's what's happened to a lot of men. Yeah. And when we just talk about how men have hurt others and their behavior's been terrible, which it has. I'm not, in many cases, I'm not saying that's not true. But if you just focus on that, there's a high rate of recidivism because of the fact that we're just trying to modify behavior rather than go after what's really at the core of this thing.
That's a great point. Yeah. Symptoms versus the actual virus or the disease. I mean, there's a lot of symptoms.
Yeah.
And not to explain our way out of them, but to understand that's part of what we're
we're not
after.
looking for the excuse and digging into this and understanding where some of these behaviors come from. Even if we go that deep into the behavior part, I'm not sure we will.
Yeah.
That's not excusing the behavior.
Yeah. So dropping into kind of, any subject, you drop into the political climate right now. That's a great example of, it's extremely complex.
Mm-hmm.
It's extremely complex.
Mm-hmm.
Just and it's that, not just complex. There's volatility to it. There's edges that get sharp fast with opinions, and so this is two guys' opinions as we walk with God in the kingdom.
Yeah,
exploring more. But I want to drop into kind of the condition of things and just and just talk about that for a while, and how masculinity is portrayed, how it's viewed. That's enough right there to just empty your pockets, on several fronts. And I think about even the disparity between how I feel as a man on a journey and how I'm portrayed in places. So when you bring up how are men portrayed, you are looking in different segments and different spaces of commentary on men and on masculinity. And so there's so many messages, tons of messaging happening on multiple fronts. So before we get immersed in just that, I think Caleb, I'm sure Caleb would appreciate a break. But so we'll take a break, and then we'll come right back on the Exploring More podcast.
Men are seeing higher suicide rates in this country, and
I think a lot of young men are actually looking
emotionally called toxic masculinity.
How did masculinity end up here? Being known for causing harm, being violent, overpowering, and unsafe, and being relationally destructive or relationally absent. This is not who men were created to be. Men have been the target of a long and brutal assault by an enemy that knows what we might become and fears it. At Zoe, we believe that if men are a big part of the problem in culture today, men could be a big part of the solution. What if masculinity was safe and loving? What if masculinity was adventurous and encouraging? What if men were brave and empathetic, engaging and helpful? What if masculinity looked like Jesus, kind and strong? What if men were no longer dangerous, but dangerous for good?
Welcome back to the Exploring More podcast, and talking about what's wrong with men, and quickly saying, let's not talk about it like that. Let's talk about it, what's missing. And kind of the first steps into the water are kind of, where are we? How are men being portrayed? Which before the break I was saying that is multifaceted. And I want to go to a couple of cultural, iconic
portrayals.
Bigger than that.
Representations.
Yeah.
Before you do, I just want to say I'm thinking about people listening to this podcast, and one of the things that, if you've listened to the Explore More podcast at all, maybe you haven't, maybe you're new to the show, but what we're promoting and what we're talking about is intimacy with God and one another. So as we talk about what's wrong, I have this vision of sitting across from another man who's visibly upset, emotional, maybe, whatever that looks like. And I just want to say, what's wrong?
Yeah.
So I just want to make it, because I think when we talk about this, it's easy to make it sort of, I don't know, impersonal. Like, yeah, there's something wrong with men. Now, I want to encourage our listeners to make it personal, and do that. Take that journey of exploring more of, what am I hearing? What am I listening to right now that's really resonating with me personally? Maybe take some notes, or take note. If you're driving, don't. But yeah, I just couldn't let go of that. It came up in me a couple of times, so I felt like I had to say something about that. This is a personal thing. I'm listening to this for me, even though we're talking about it.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's healthy, good, and and somehow encouraging in a very volatile and weighty subject.
Mm-hmm.
But about the portrayal piece.
Yeah, representation.
So you have to go to media. And I say that because there was a day 60, 70 years ago, black and white, where fatherhood, men were portrayed a certain way.
Father knows best.
I mean, and
yeah,
all of those characters, back in the 50s, even when you went to, the genres even changed from Westerns and the Rifleman, shows that maybe we watched, our generation. I'm 60.
I'm not.
And yet, they were.
But I still remember some of them.
And if they weren't your shows, they were your rerun shows.
Right.
When we were boys.
Andy Griffith.
And all those characters, black and white things that came on after school. And so I think you have to go to, and I've watched a few of the documentaries over the years about music and culture, and definitely film and television and culture. I'm not eliminating athletics and sports and professional sports. I think what we had back then was a veil that those sports heroes might have been heroes on the field, but many of them weren't good men.
Yeah, they were heels off the field.
There was difficulty for sure. in the kind of men that they were. So I want to be careful to say that men were better back then. What I'm saying though is, in terms of this question, how's masculinity portrayed in the world? You've got this tension between iconic shapers of our thinking. that's and when media, particularly music and the artists that represent it, what they sing about, the songs they write, that's a whole story in and of itself. That you find masculinity in that. When you hear anybody who hears Cat Stevens' "Cats in the Cradle,"
sure,
and
Father and Son, another song, yeah,
and Mike and the Mechanics. There's songs that just really are representation of masculine roles.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about, masculine roles. How's masculinity portrayed? What does that look like, when it's no longer Wilford Brimley and the grandfather who's, at work in a family, grandfathering. And I know not everybody's going to watch episode after episode of The Waltons, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
But I think when we start to really look at some of the figures and the portrayals that shape boys, that shape men into how they see themselves, and what a man is. So that's where I want to go with the portrayal of men is actually inviting masculine hearts to somehow comprehend, and even with very little initiation and validation by other men, which is the point I'm actually trying to make. Culture and social spaces like media, film, TV.
When we were growing up, it was just television,
and
maybe the movies
and songs, and those are just such powerful.
Yeah.
And yes, now we went from 5-7 channels and 3 or 4 major production filmmaking companies to platforms beyond. I mean, that's making my point that we watch stuff.
Yeah.
How is this portrayed, and what is it to be a man, and what is it to be masculine, is being offered in so many things that we see from boyhood on. Advertising. It's in that space of, all the TV shows and what we see now on, what's the old sex sells. I mean, there's a lot of subtle, and subtle doesn't mean weak. Subtle can be very, very, very powerful in how it is inviting you to see not just masculinity, but how it's inviting men, masculine hearts, to see the world and move in their world.
Yeah. I think most of us walk around mostly unaware of how much we're influenced by things that you're talking about.
People are writing on the wall of your heart
all the time
since you entered the story.
Yeah.
And a lot of that gets deeply, deeply rooted.
Yeah. And much of it has been co-opted, I mean, none more so, I think, than, the pinnacle of creation, the beauties in our life. They've been co-opted by that media system that you're talking about.
Yeah. So it invites men.
Why is a woman in a bikini standing next to a chainsaw, right?
I don't think it's because she's a lumberjack.
No,
or
it isn't.
In that
and
space.
So it's been co-opted in this way, and so many of us, I'd say most of us our wires have been crossed.
Yeah.
From what God's original intention was to.
Yeah, which is where we want to go.
Absolutely.
We definitely want to go with what design, how were we designed. But it's still challenging.
What are we designed for?
And it's challenging to go there until we continue.
No, I don't want to go there yet. But it is.
Where are we?
It's a corruption of that original intention.
Corruption's a good word for it. Yeah. The other element.
And yet, wait, before you move on, to stop you in your tracks there are a few examples where I think the media has even in more recent times. There's a show with Tom Selleck called Blue Bloods. Yeah, he's a great grandfather and a good man, and he's portrayed there not in this kind of, everybody bows down to the patriarch. No, he's a fault. He's got his own faults, and he makes mistakes. But the character is brought back, or there's an opportunity for him to learn from his mistakes, even in his late 60s. As he's trying to lead the family and the New York Police Department. It's really interesting to see. So there's a few. Yeah. They're few and far between.
And I go back, SJ, no, I'm not arguing. I'm just saying I'm going back to the representations of 50, 60, and 70 years ago.
Yep.
That became our reruns. And here's Blue Blood. Here's an exception. I was talking about here was the norm.
Sure.
In how they were portrayed.
It's helping to make your point, because that's the exception.
What I'm saying.
Yeah.
and here's the exception. And so, and it's some, to make clear, we work primarily in a men's initiative. So I'm not sure I want to call us experts. I want to call us very engaged in this process, very engaged in this process. And so the portrayal, to just stay in that track, I think that we're talking about, in some ways, caricatures, okay?
For sure.
And so here you line up all these different kinds of men and how they're portrayed. James Bond, churchmen,
Al Bundy.
Fathers, not father figures, fathers portrayed. Mm-hmm. So you start putting all those things on the table, and that's how confusing it gets. How fast it gets confusing in what's a boy to think, because how masculinity is portrayed in culture to a man, it gets really personal really fast. Mm. Who were the men in your life? They're the ones that portrayed it. And then there's this other part of, well, who did you watch and who did you listen to? Mm-hmm. So now they're having a voice and a presence for you to somehow put together what a man is.
Right.
I had in walking a lot of men into and through the masculine journey and these different components that we've talked about many, many times. I remember having this conversation with 4 or 5 guys on camera, and one of them remembers being 8, going to a professional sporting event and with his dad, and sitting in the stands, and there were it was predominantly men, not only men, but women too, but men and boys, and he remembers, oh, this is what men do. Mm. They go to games, they drink beer, and they yell. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the old story about, the 3 or 4 or 5 blind guys that are presented an elephant, and wherever they're touching, if he's on the side, well, an elephant's like a wall. Well, an elephant's like a tree. An elephant's kind of like
a playground slide,
a rope,
or a
swing,
or hose. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
An elephant's, if you got his ear,
right.
You're coming to these. An elephant's like a blanket,
mm-hmm.
And that's not at all. All those things are parts of and make up the elephant. And so the elephant in the room that we're talking about has all these parts that require, what we're trying to do is to move around and make and let each one make their contribution to, how are men portrayed. And so I think where I want to, after all of that, I think for the men are portrayed by the men that you've encountered.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Like personally, your dad, your grandpa,
your coach, your coaches.
Yeah. Yes.
And then, like you said,
and I want to talk way more about this historical, some of the shifts and pivots in masculinity that have, happened over time and gotten us in just an interesting place.
I want to add, because I think it's relevant and kind of sets the table for where we're going, I think. I looked up the definition of disciple. So one of the definitions is one of the original followers of Jesus. And if you're a Christian and you went to church, that's probably what you think.
That word is common. Common, yeah.
That's actually the third part of the definition. The first one is one who embraces and assists in spreading the teachings of another.
Yeah.
The second one is an active adherent as of a movement or philosophy. So I think we're born into the world all as little disciples, and we're looking for a master.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in us to do that. So when you're at a hockey game and dad's throwing a bag of popcorn or whatever onto the ice, you're a disciple of that guy. If you grew up in a house that was father knows best, you're a disciple of that philosophy, whatever it might be.
Yeah. So talking about now so how it's portrayed is one thing. Then the impression is another. Mm-hmm. Is that attractive to you? Is that what you think you need to be, or is there something even in you that says that can't be right?
Yeah, let me put meat on the
bones.
So
what's the impression? What's the impression
absolutely
that it has on you? And yet, even if it feels I don't know that I want to be that, and yet if that's what a man is, or that's what a man does, it's going to bring this invitation and conundrum at the same time to a young masculine heart.
It brings what your interpretation of the truth is to it. So when I was growing up, I've told my story on the podcast before, but really quickly, my dad was in a wheelchair. I'm the youngest of 5. He was on the older side when I was born. He was in his mid-40s. And for 1970, that was pretty old. So he and I didn't engage a whole lot. I did a lot on my own. I figured out things on my own. I learned that early and often, and I arranged for love by doing things for him and for others. But he wasn't really all that engaged with me. Fast forward to when I'm 24 years old and my son is born. How do you think I raised my son? Figure it out.
Yeah.
I had to figure it out when I was a kid.
Right.
You figure it out too.
There's your disciple.
I was a disciple of that philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah. And the wild thing to this point is there's a time when that is actually
appropriate.
An appropriate an appropriate invitation to a younger heart that sometimes, bud, you just need to figure things out. This is one of those times.
An invitation is way different than admonition.
And
right?
or just that
no doubt.
that facial, that tone that you just said. I mean, how could a boy not think my dad's mad?
Oh yeah.
At me. So fatherhood becomes a huge part of this conversation, no doubt. And yet I think boys are looking at this question, how are men portrayed? I am one. And how do I navigate? And if there was any consciousness to that thought whatsoever, it would probably be easier, but it's not. You're to your point earlier about a disciple. No, you're wired to be impressed upon.
Right.
And that's both glorious if it's going well, and notorious if it's not.
Right.
Right. And yet there's forces even beyond that are shaping, the perspective, the attitudes, the beliefs that men hold about masculinity, about what that means. So a couple other thoughts to kind of tee up the next, some of the next things that we want to explore. I realized maybe I should have said this at the beginning. Talking about this I don't know how inflammatory it is. And I don't think our objective at all, SJ, is to get sympathy for men.
No.
I do hope that there's maybe some greater understanding for men, or maybe if it's for some reason, if this gets into the hands of women, It's okay that
it is.
that they're, hearing us talk about what's wrong with us, what's missing, and how did we get here, and how do we get out of here? Mm-hmm. All of those components. But I do think that we were having a conversation, a bunch of guys at my house a few weeks ago, and one of the guys was talking about Zoe and the way that it had had impressions on his life, his journey. Mm-hmm. And I remember C.S. Lewis being in the conversation a little bit, but then he said something that I have felt strongly about for a long time, and it was just one of those. It just was a permission. He said, it reminds him of the impact of AA. Mm. And I was so happy to hear that. Yeah. And okay, I'm not leaving the subject, but I want to establish this for going forward. Do you have any wild guess at how many people have been helped, encouraged, treated by AA over, 70 years now? I think.
It would have
it's
to
almost
be,
70, I think.
It would have to be millions and millions. I mean.
Yes.
Yeah.
They can't count now.
Right.
It's in the hundreds of millions.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How can something, I'm asking listeners, think about, how can something like that not only be around that long, but be that successful? Not 100% success rate.
No.
That's not how it works. But be that successful, continue to grow and build to where you're involved now in 3 and maybe the 4th generation from founding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my first response is because it works.
And that's a part of this conversation going forward. Mm-hmm. Why does it work? Not just how does it work.
Right.
Why does it work? Mm-hmm. And so I want to answer that. Mm-hmm. As we talked about it on the porch and what I feel about with what we get to do, the similarity of not only the actual steps, there's just some things that we do at encounters, at the DFG Men's Summit. There's things that are really similar to some of the steps.
Right.
Because they're good.
Yeah.
Because they're helpful.
Right.
Because they're
they
true. And
because we've experienced.
And then there's the imitation of AA with Celebrate Recovery.
Yeah.
Which is also great, and other aspects of that, and other spin-offs of that, mm-hmm. that are impacting people. Okay, I'm still not answering the question, but I'm giving you more and more of how weighty this idea is.
Sure.
And yeah, whether Celebrate Recovery created it so that God was more in front, I am convinced that God is in the AA space, because the truth is there, and the empathy's there, and the invitation's there, and the brotherhood and sisterhood and accountability that comes with the friendship and identification with something's wrong. Mm-hmm. So that is the ingredient. That is it. That the men that we get to help, encourage, and partner with, for the most part, they're not wandering in accidentally. They're coming because they heard this is a place where guys get some help.
Men and women in substance abuse know something's not right.
And that
So what we want to,
that's
I think this
simply,
is your point. So
simply
we're,
put.
We're trying to help, primarily at Zoe, we're a men's ministry, but also women and couples, but we're trying to help folks see that something's not right. And maybe you felt that. Like, I've asked myself that question, what is wrong with me? Or what is wrong? Like, why does this... No matter what I do,
that's
or
Paul.
Whatever.
Paul in Romans 7,
exactly.
The Romans 7 dilemma.
So that's what maybe that's we've come full circle. We started with what's wrong with men. I mean, and so we want to ask you, listeners, and we want to ask each other too, because we're still on this journey. What's wrong?
Yeah,
because to the man, mm-hmm. Is there something not right in your life? Yeah, there's something not right. I don't know what it is.
Do you? That's right. So, do you know what it is?
I see all the symptoms of it.
That's
every
what's
day.
Beautiful about the AA community is the doors open, and you can go to a meeting anywhere. Mm-hmm. That's how it's grown and progressed. People who have had their lives change become sponsors. People who have had their lives change make arrangements for it to be at the civic center or the town hall or this church
basements
or this community center.
Sure.
You know, you talk about a small group model. You talk about, but that's critical to this, that I can acknowledge that something's not right in me. Something's not right. And it's affecting things instead of covering it up, right? That's not the guy who's going to go to the AA meeting, because you walk in that meeting, you walking in is a declaration of, I need some help.
Something's not
I
right.
heard you guys do that here.
Give me some help. Yeah.
So what's wrong with men is a very, very deep conversation. I another preview. We got to talk about Neo and the Matrix. You know something's wrong, Neo.
Like a splinter in your mind.
Yes, and when you pay your taxes, when you go to church, I mean, that is a helpful posture to have, I think, in this conversation about masculinity, that something is wrong, which means that there's a right. If something is wrong, you're observing the wrong, it inevitably points you to, then there's a better way, there's a different way, there's a right way, there's something different than this and what I'm feeling and what I keep doing, and I want and need some help. So
there's a way to set the bone that's been broken.
Yeah. Well, and re-breaking it is unfortunately a part of that. But I'd like to just continue to kind of add weight to a very heavy scale on what has come against masculinity, what therefore why it's portrayed, the way it has, but the hurt in masculinity and the hurt caused by masculinity is related.
Oh, sure.
Is deeply, deeply connected. Yeah. And so uninitiated, unfathered, unfinished, all of those things start to come into how we got here and why there is portrayal the way it's being portrayed.
Right.
And like you said, so let's keep kind of moving upstream, upriver to some more of these headwaters that I think even a kingdom perspective is actually, I believe, more relevant, more helpful, and more encouraging as to why men aren't where we could be. And that somehow not be the chest poke, but rather be the invitation. Yes. Absolutely. So, part one, you good?
Yeah. Part one of We'll find out together.
So thanks for joining us on the Exploring More podcast for a conversation that I think had us standing in one space for 45 minutes. And we'll try to move forward, but laying out the different ingredients to this, I think, is really helpful to why this is such a significant subject and why this is a big part of our life work in not only our own story, overcoming and becoming, but the invitation that if us, then why not them? Why not all the men that we can come into contact with or come in contact with us? So stay with us, stay patient, stay curious, and let's see where this goes in the conversation of what's wrong with men. We'll see you next time on the Exploring More podcast.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoe.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoe on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoe on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.